XGF, who slept with my brother a day before our wedding, reaches out to me 12 years later, a week before my wedding, but this time, I need revenge. I'm a 38-year-old man who is about to marry my wonderful fiancée, 35F, in less than a week. We've been dating for 4 years, and I'm very happy with her. This is not my first time getting engaged though. 12 years ago, I was supposed to marry my ex-girlfriend, 38F, who was my first love from high school. We had a long relationship of almost 10 years, and we shared a home for 5 of them. I was eager to tie the knot with her, and she seemed to feel the same way. My family adored my ex too, so they were overjoyed when I told them we were getting married. But the wedding never happened, because the day before the ceremony, my ex cheated on me with my brother, 34M. She had asked me to stay at a hotel the night before the wedding, while she stayed at our place. She said it was bad luck to see each other before the big day, and I agreed to her request. But I had left my shoes at home, and I realized that after I checked into the hotel, I decided to go back and get them since they were very important to me. I kept them in a shoebox in our bedroom. When I got home, I noticed that the living room lights were off, which was unusual because my ex always left them on. I thought she had finally remembered to turn them off, and I went straight to the bedroom. But when I opened the door, I saw the most horrible sight of my life. My ex was in bed with my own brother, and they were so into it that they didn't even notice me at first. It took them a few seconds to see me, but by then, I was frozen in shock. I felt like my world was falling apart, and as soon as I snapped out of it, I ran out of there, while my ex shouted my name. I drove back to the hotel, in a state of disbelief and panic. I couldn't accept what I had seen. I was supposed to get married the next day, but this was madness. I took some time to calm down in my room, and then I broke down in tears for an hour. Luckily, I hadn't told my ex which hotel I was staying at, so she couldn't find me. She only texted me a lot. She apologized over and over and tried to tell me that it was a one-time thing, but I didn't buy it. She also said that she was nervous about the wedding and needed to relax, and my brother had been supportive of her, so she turned to him. I couldn't believe that she was trying to justify herself after what I had seen, and I blocked her right away. I also blocked my brother because I didn't want to hear any of their lame excuses. It took me some effort, but I managed to cancel all the plans for the wedding as soon as possible. I didn't care how much money I lost. I just wanted to get out of that situation. My ex had wasted 10 years of my life, so I didn't mind losing a few $1,000s as long as I didn't have to see her again. The next thing I did was I called my parents and told them what had happened. They were torn between comforting me and disowning my brother, so I gave them some space to think about it. By then, it was very late at night, so I ordered some food and then cried myself to sleep. After that day, I only saw my ex twice. Once when she came to get her stuff and leave, and the other time a few years later at a friend's party, where she tried to talk to me, but I walked away as soon as I saw her coming. My brother and I haven't spoken since then, either. My parents have cut him off for what he did to me. The last thing I heard, he was working in Europe and hasn't been back here for 3 years. Anyway, that was all in the past, and I've moved on from that terrible experience. I have moved on with my life and found a better partner who has my complete trust. Everything was perfect until a few days ago, exactly a week before my wedding, when my ex contacted me. I don't know how she got my information or learned about my wedding, but she messaged me from a new Facebook account, since I had blocked her original one long ago, and sent me a lot of messages about how crushed she was to find out that I was getting married again. I found it odd that she said again, because we never actually got married, even though we almost did. But anyway, it was like a bad flashback, the way she begged me to take her back despite what she had done, and how I was the only man she ever loved. It really affected me, and I told my fiancé about it right away. Part of me was so annoyed by this that I wanted to tell her off for disturbing me before my wedding, but another, more vengeful part of me really wanted revenge. I knew that I had handled the situation well all those years ago and acted like an adult, but this time, I wanted to hurt her so much that she would never think of contacting me again. When I told my fiancé how I felt, she fully supported me, because she had also been cheated on in the past, and even though it wasn't a 10-year relationship, it still stung, so she understood me. So this time, instead of just ignoring it, we came up with a plan to get revenge, and make sure that my ex felt the same pain that she caused me. That's why, a couple of hours after I got her text, I texted her back, saying that I was finally willing to talk to her. She said that she was ready to come to my place right then, but I told her to book a room in a nearby hotel, and I would meet her there the next day, so that my fiancé wouldn't get suspicious. Of course, my fiancé was next to me while I was texting her. She agreed to everything, and so the next day I went to her hotel at the time we had set. She looked ecstatic to see me and was actually crying tears of joy, but she would be crying tears of sorrow in a few minutes. She made me sit down and started telling me how she had been so regretful about what had happened for the the past 12 years and wanted to make it up to me, but didn't know how to reach me until she heard from a friend that I was getting married again, and she just had to text me one last time, or else she would lose me forever. I paid attention to her and even acted like I cared, and held her hands while she talked. Meanwhile, I was just waiting for my fiancé to arrive. Almost 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and I ran to open it. My fiancé came in, followed by all our groomsmen and bridesmaids, wearing masks of my brother's face. They had brought a cake as well, and even that had my brother's face smiling up at us. My ex was terrified and couldn't even say anything. We shouted surprise, while she stared with a shocked expression on her face, because I'm sure she never expected this. We managed to persuade the hotel staff that we were surprising her, and it was fairly easy, since she had already told them to let in any guest who wanted to see her, which she meant only for me, but I had other plans. After she realized what was happening, she started weeping and babbling some nonsense while crying, but I wasn't going to let her get away with that. She had the nerve to message me just a week before my wedding, even after cheating on me with my own brother a day before we were supposed to get married, so now she had to face the consequences of her actions. I made it clear to her that she got what she asked for, and that she was delusional if she thought I would ever take her back after she betrayed me. She had no right to contact me after the hell she put me through, and I was happy that she suffered from what I did, because it was all her fault. I was very harsh and blunt while saying all this, but she kept crying and said that if I had moved on, then I should have just blocked and deleted her, instead of deliberately hurting her like this. But I had no sympathy for her, not then and not now. I told her to leave me alone forever, and then walked out of the hotel room, leaving her in tears. Now I have my wedding in 2 days, but some of my fiancé's friends think I should apologize to my ex, because they think I was too cruel to her that day, and that she didn't deserve this, no matter what she did. My groomsmen disagree with this, since they have been my friends since middle school, and they know how I struggled with depression and suicidal thoughts after breaking up with my ex because of what she did. They also knew how much I cared for her and what she meant to me, so they supported what I did. My fiancé's friends were probably hoping for some juicy gossip, but this was too real and raw for them. My fiancé is on my side and doesn't want me to apologize, but her friends are threatening to boycott the wedding if I don't. Now I'm really conflicted, because on one hand, I don't want my fiancé to be unhappy on our wedding day, since she loves her friends. But on the other hand, I don't think I owe my ex anything. She could have just stayed away from me, and none of this would have happened, but she just couldn't stand seeing me happy. In fact, she's still acting like the victim and keeps sending me messages from fake accounts about how I shattered her heart, and that karma will get me someday. I don't care for this kind of emotional blackmail, not from my ex, and certainly not from my fiancé's bridesmaids. Now I know that she won't ask me to apologize for her sake, but I still feel somewhat obligated to do so, and that's why I'm here. I'm running out of time and I need to make a decision right now. Eita for humiliating my cheating ex after she tried to get back with me just a week before my wedding. Update 1. The feedback on this has been quite mixed. To put it mildly, there's only 1 day left until the wedding, and I've decided to consult with my fiancé before I do anything. As many people recommended, I told her how I felt, and as soon as I did, she said that I definitely didn't need to apologize to my ex just because her bridesmaids wanted me to, and if that upset them, then they could miss her wedding. She said that her bridesmaids had no clue what had happened, and most of them assumed that I'd gone too far, even when she told them that my ex and I had been together for 10 years and had cheated on me with my brother, things that are unimaginably cruel and don't warrant any forgiveness. But they weren't persuaded and still thought that I was being unfair and owed her an apology. So she stopped trying to justify my actions to them and even told them that they were free to skip our wedding if they didn't like it. She hasn't talked to her friends in a whole day, and it looks very unlikely that they'll show up. One of them even refunded her for the cost of the bridesmaid dress that she'd bought for them all, and she thinks that most of them are going to bail. She's acting tough for me, but I know she's hurting, since these women have been her friends since high school. My fiancé says she doesn't mind, but I know she does deep down. So I've decided to talk to her friends and try to persuade them myself. As for my ex, well, she's still being a complete nuisance. A few hours ago, she managed to get hold of me, and then wasted 15 whole minutes trying to fight with me. She was really trying to make me believe that I was still in love with her, but was just too stubborn to admit it. And why would she say that? Well, apparently, it's because I went to such extremes only to embarrass her, so it clearly meant that I still had feelings for her deep down. Yeah, she's right, but those feelings are of loathing and contempt. For some reason, she thinks that I just wanted to see her one last time, which is why I'd held her hands while she was talking, but honestly, that was just to stun her even more. I literally laughed in her face while talking to her, hoping that she'd get the message, but she kept on rambling about how we were meant to to be, and that I had to cancel the wedding before I made a huge mistake. Honestly, the only reason I'm even listening to any of this is so that she doesn't do anything stupid. I've been trying to reach her parents so they can take her away, but haven't been able to get through. So I'm just waiting for them to reply, and after that, I'll finally be able to get rid of her for good. Don't get me wrong, I still hate her, but I also don't want her to harm herself. I'm not that heartless. Update 2. Hey everyone, so we're finally married now. It's been a few days since the ceremony, and I still can't wrap my head around it. She's now my wife. I'm ecstatic, but sadly, there's still bad news. Her friends didn't show up to the wedding, even though I tried to get them to come. I personally phoned each of them to explain why I'd done what I'd done and why I didn't feel like apologizing, but they didn't care much for it. Even when I asked them to come just for my wife's sake, they weren't too keen on it, and it just seemed weird to me, because I definitely go to a friend's wedding even if I didn't really like the person they were marrying. I only found out the real reason yesterday, when my wife finally admitted that she'd had a hunch her friends wouldn't come, regardless of whether I apologized, simply because of the fact that she'd refused to do what they'd wanted her to do and had disagreed with them. They didn't appreciate that at all and thought that they were all one group, so they always needed to have a unified stance. These were her friends from high school, and while she'd managed to somehow keep them throughout the years, because they never really had anything significant to disagree on, this was the first time that their friendship was challenged, and she chose me over her friends, which they didn't like at all. She said that she was a bit upset about it, but was too ashamed to admit it, because it was all so childish. I didn't mind though, since at least now I was sure that this wasn't really my fault, and her friends were just selfish. My wife even said that part of her was happy that they'd declined to come, because she could finally stop trying to fit in all the time, and could live life on her own terms without constantly having to seek her friends' approval. So that was good for us, I guess. Also, my ex's parents finally got back to me on the night before my wedding. I told them quickly what their daughter had tried to do, and how they needed to get to the hotel she'd been staying in, and take her back with them for her own safety, because she was being really crazy and delusional, and I didn't think it was okay for her to be by herself. As it turns out, they'd been on a hiking trip where they had no signal, but now that they were back, they assured me that they'd come to take her back as soon as they could, and even thanked me for letting them know. I haven't heard from them since, but I'm assuming they got her back home safely. Update 3. Hi everyone. It's been a week since my wedding, and sadly, it's been nothing but drama so far. As I'd mentioned, my girlfriend or her parents hadn't been in touch with me since the last time I talked to her parents. I'd thought that they'd take her home, but apparently not. 2 nights ago, there was a knock at our door, and since it was really late, my wife and I had no clue who it could be because we weren't expecting anyone. I made the mistake of opening the door before checking the cameras, and when I opened up, my ex barged in and walked in with her bags. My wife was sitting on the couch and literally jumped to her feet as soon as my ex walked in. I was about to ask her what she was doing in my house, but before I could say anything, she told me that she was here to stay. She told me that her parents had come to take her home a few days back, but she'd refused to go since she knew that I would take her back soon. My wife and I were shocked and had no idea how to react because of how crazy all of this seemed. She told me that her parents had tried to make her go back with them, but she'd had a big fight with them and ended up staying at the hotel. But now, she was running out of money, so she decided to move to my place instead. The reason was that if I spent enough time with her again, then I'd remember the past, and I'd fall back in love with her again. I absolutely had no idea how to react simply because of how weird all of this was. My wife tried to talk to her, but she ignored her presence completely and continued talking to me, demanding that I let her live with us. I told her as kindly as I could that I was a married man now, and she couldn't just show up here to live with me. But she said that she didn't acknowledge the wedding. So, in her eyes, I was still single. I couldn't believe that this was happening, but neither did I have the heart to kick her out because, honestly, she seemed seriously unstable, and it seemed to me that she needed help. So I sat her down and told her to wait in the living room while I went to the bedroom with my wife to discuss what we should do next. Thankfully, my wife was also quite understanding and knew that there was something seriously wrong with how my ex was acting. She needed serious professional help, and we realized it. I tried to reach her parents, but they didn't answer my calls and texted back, saying that they couldn't force her to come back anymore, and she was clearly too psychotic to live with them. So she was on her own now. They were clearly ashamed of her, and it was disgraceful how they were ready to just abandon their own daughter once they realized she was going through something. With no other option left, I decided to call my own parents, who showed up within half an hour. My ex had fallen asleep on the couch in the meantime, And that was really lucky, since when my parents arrived, we decided to take her to a therapist as soon as possible because there was no telling what she was capable of doing at this point. My wife and I let her stay that night because, honestly, neither of us could bring ourselves to hate her anymore because of how sad the whole situation was. Clearly, something had broken in her mind, and she needed to be treated for it as soon as possible, and the poor woman didn't even have her parents to rely on anymore. My parents and I took her to the hospital the next day, and she was still babbling about how she was happy that I was finally coming around, and even started planning our wedding. We took her to see a mental health professional, but she refused, saying that she felt perfectly fine. Anyway, after a lot of trouble and complications, the doctors managed to calm her down with some meds and gave her some drugs that I don't remember the names of. She looked more peaceful after that, and a couple of hours later, she finally told us she wanted to go home. We took her home and let her sleep in a room while we stayed in the living room, wondering what to do next. My wife and I were very glad when she said she was ready to go home, and we even helped her load her stuff in the back of our car, and we drove her home together. She didn't say a word the whole time, and neither did we because there was nothing to say in a situation like this. When we reached her home, she said sorry to both of us for the trouble she had caused and said she felt humiliated by everything that had happened. My wife and I felt very uncomfortable during this whole thing, but we told her it was okay and told her to look after herself before driving back home. I wasn't sure if it would make a difference or not, but I did call my ex's mother and told her everything that had happened, and I think that finally made them understand how serious the situation was. She told me she had moved in with her daughter and said she would keep us posted, and no matter what has happened so far, my wife and I sincerely hope that she gets better.